Welcome back to the Explainer. Grab a marker, because today we're sketching out the ultimate WW2 Tactical Playbook on a giant mental whiteboard. We'll be mapping out the specific maneuvers, the devastating blunders, and the brilliant strategies that completely defined this global conflict. We are going to draw out the exact moves commanders made to outsmart their enemies, complete with imaginary stick figures, arrows, and battle lines. It's going to be absolutely fascinating, so let's jump right in.
Here is our tactical menu for today's Explainer. We've got 5 major theaters to map out quickly. First, the sheer shock of Blitzkrieg. Second, the freezing traps of winter warfare. Third, the high-stakes chess match of naval combat and code-breaking. Fourth, the massive deceptions on D-Day. And finally, the grueling Pacific Island hopping campaign.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the art of Blitzkrieg. So, Blitzkrieg, lightning war. You probably already know the translation, but let's talk about the why. The whole point here? Avoid a repeat of the First World War. Nobody in Germany wanted another slow, muddy, grinding trench nightmare. While the French were literally still dispatching messages via motorbike and prepping for WW1, Hitler unleashed a totally new doctrine. It was all about moving so incredibly fast that the enemy couldn't even process what was happening before they were completely surrounded. Game over. Picture this drawn out step by step. Step 1, the Germans advance, purposefully driving thousands of refugees westward to physically clog up the roads. Totally jams the Allied response. Step 2, and this is the wild part, the French left the Ardennes forest practically undefended. They thought all those hills and trees made it naturally impenetrable. Well, the Germans just smashed 50 divisions right through those trees anyway. And then step 3, a massive lightning-fast encirclement. This one brilliant, daring tactical move trapped the best Allied forces, forcing that infamous, desperate, last-minute escape across the Channel at Dunkirk. Shifting gears over to the Eastern Front for Section 2, traps and winter warfare. Speed is great, right? Until you hit a wall of freezing mud. This matchup perfectly illustrates the stark contrast between the two sides. Imagine sketching out these two forces. On one hand, you have Hitler's absolutely arrogant lack of winter prep. I mean, the temperature dropped so low that the oil was literally freezing inside German vehicles. They were leaving frozen horses by the roadside just to navigate the snow, and the troops didn't even have winter coats. Just brutal. But on the other hand, Stalin's tactical adaptations. The Soviets had brilliantly relocated their factories way out east to keep pumping out tanks. Plus, while the Germans were shivering, Stalin's calling in these specially trained Siberian troops who are perfectly at home fighting in extreme sub-zero temperatures. And the culmination of all this was Stalingrad. The Soviets basically took a page right out of Hitler's own playbook and turned his beloved encirclement tactic right back against him. Step 1, Soviet forces fiercely hold the shattered city for 5 grueling months, buying precious, precious time. Step 2, they gather up all those factory-fresh tanks and planes we just talked about. And then, Step 3, they execute this massive ring around the city, trapping the entire German 6th Army in the freezing cold. And because Hitler absolutely refused to authorize a retreat, it became a total catastrophe for the German forces. So, we've mapped out the forests of Europe and the frozen cities of Russia, but I've got to ask you directly, how exactly do you win an ocean? We are snapping our attention away from the land war to look at the vast, watery battlegrounds of the Atlantic and the Pacific. Let's shift our tactical board to the high seas for Section 3, naval combat and code breaking. Let's rapidly check these off our tactical list here. The Allies had to innovate, and fast, to stop German U-boats from basically starving Britain. They pushed out improved radar systems to spot the subs. They deployed aircraft with way longer ranges to patrol from the skies. They dialed in advanced convoy tactics to guard their cargo ships. But the absolute masterstroke? Alan Turing and his brilliant team cracking the German Enigma code. Literally a game changer. Suddenly, the Allies are reading German comms, and the U-boat threat was drastically reduced. Meanwhile, over in the Pacific, Japan is relying on a totally different naval tactic, the preemptive strike. December 7, 1941, they launched that devastating surprise air raid on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. The attack was incredibly destructive, built entirely on speed and absolute surprise, but it had a critical, fatal flaw. In their massive rush, the Japanese forces entirely skipped over the naval fuel storage tanks and the submarine bases. They left them completely intact. That meant their victory was purely based on speed, not sustained power, which basically allowed the U.S. Pacific Fleet to dust itself off and get back in the fight way sooner than Japan anticipated. Let's wipe the tactical board clean and head back to Europe for Section 4, Deception on D-Day. Now, what is absolutely fascinating here is the sheer scale of the lie.
The Germans knew an Allied invasion of Europe was coming, obviously, but they didn't know where. Thanks to some next-level Allied trickery, we're talking fake armies, double agents, the whole shebang, they completely fooled the Germans into believing the attack would hit Calais, which was heavily fortified. The actual target? Normandy. Significantly less fortified, and it had way better beaches for a massive amphibious landing.
Let's map out the exact chronological plays General Eisenhower drew up for this massive operation. Night of June 5th, paratroopers drop inland in a pretty chaotic operation to sabotage defenses and secure key bridges to block German reinforcements. Early the next morning, June 6th, an absolutely massive naval barrage starts hammering the German fortifications. And then the day itself, a brutal, hard-fought struggle as the Americans hit Utah and Omaha, the British take Gold and Sword, and the Canadians land at Juneau. It was a meticulously sequenced plan that finally cracked the Atlantic Wall and pushed the Allies inland. Real quick before we leave the European theater, I absolutely have to share this historical micro-narrative with you. Fast forward a bit to Hitler's desperate Battle of the Bulge counterattack. The Germans actually managed to trap a pocket of American troops in the Belgian town of Bastogne. So the Germans send over this very formal official message demanding the Americans surrender or face total annihilation. The American commanding officer reads this note, and his official reply, just one word: nuts. Literally, that was it. General Patton's army eventually broke through the siege, and the German advance totally collapsed.
All right, pivoting to the final phase of the war. Section 5, the Island-Hopping Campaign.
General Nimitz was overseeing what became known as the Island-Hopping Campaign. If you were to sketch this strategy out, it is just a relentless, repeating loop. Step 1. Execute a grueling, hard-fought landing on a tiny, deeply fortified island. Step 2. Battle a completely ferocious enemy that flat-out refused to surrender. Step 3. Secure the island, restock, and move one agonizing step closer to the Japanese mainland. It was incredibly repetitive, highly deadly, and demanded just unimaginable endurance from the American forces.
And you know, the closer the Allies got to that mainland, the more ferocious that resistance became. By the time American forces hit Okinawa, the Japanese were widely utilizing kamikaze attacks. To really understand this tactic, you have to look at the cultural context of the time. There was this deep-seated belief that dying in battle was the highest honor possible, while surrendering was the ultimate, unforgivable disgrace. Because of that, launching these desperate, ferocious suicide attacks against U.S. ships became a standard and frankly terrifying tactic of resistance.
Ultimately, the Pacific War was brought to a sudden, devastating halt by a totally unprecedented show of technological force. 2 successful atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This overwhelming display of power really had 2 main aims. First, to finally coerce a Japanese surrender and avoid a horrific ground invasion of the mainland. And second, it serves as a very stark, undeniable warning to the observing Soviet Union about Western military capabilities.
And that wraps up our tactical whiteboard session for this explainer. The Second World War was over, but just take a step back and look at the board we've mapped out today. In the aftermath of all these brilliant and brutal tactics, 2 major superpowers with entirely opposite ideologies, the United States and the Soviet Union, emerged victorious. The tensions were already simmering right under the surface. With the atomic age now wide open, what new kind of war was about to begin? A very, very cold one. I hope this explainer helped bring the strategic moves of WW2 to life for you. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.